In my previous life, I was tied up on my wedding night. The woman who bound me was dashing and heroic. She put on my wedding dress, patted my face, and said, "Don't worry, little sister, I only need tonight." My mouth was gagged, from dusk until dawn. The next day, Shu Changfeng woke up feeling both ashamed and furious, vowing to catch her and avenge me. Yet he was captivated by her boldness and passion. Not only did he secretly let her stay in the mansion behind my back, but later he even allowed her to kill my brother and humiliate me. A great fire in the Shu mansion left my body with no trace, but I was reborn and returned to the day the emperor arranged my marriage. This time, I chose that troublesome crown prince who had never gotten along with me since childhood. When I opened my eyes again, I was kneeling in the golden hall, and all I could see was the spotless floor. After a sharp ringing in my ears, everything became clear. I lifted my head in confusion and saw my father and brother standing beside me. The court officials, noticing my strange behavior, all turned to look at me. The familiar scenes suddenly flooded my vision, and memories rushed back in an instant. My body trembled, and I was so shocked I almost cried out. I had actually been reborn, returning to the day the emperor granted me a marriage. From the high throne, the emperor kindly inquired, "Although I am arranging a marriage for you, I still wish to hear your opinion. So, between these two young men before the hall, which one do you favor more?" Upon hearing this, everyone exchanged knowing smiles. Everyone knows that the two young men standing before the hall, one is Shu Changfeng, whom I have admired for years and with whom I have long been in mutual affection, while the other is Crown Prince Shen Changyi, with whom I have been at odds since childhood. Who I would choose goes without saying. My father stood by my side, beaming with joy as he looked upon his future son-in-law with satisfaction, and Shu Changfeng gazed at me tenderly. Even someone as reserved and self-possessed as him couldn't help but be moved and overjoyed at this moment, such a scene of mutual affection. Yet I only felt anger. Memories from my past life flooded my mind, and my entire being screamed for revenge. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, I dug my nails into the soft flesh of my palm and bowed in gratitude. "Thank you for your Majesty's great kindness. I, your humble subject, am deeply fond of the Crown Prince." For a moment, the grand hall fell so silent you could hear a pin drop. Shen Changyi, who had been wearing a sour expression in front of the hall, staggered slightly, looking at me with shock and disbelief, as if he were about to charge forward and tear me apart. The court officials below exchanged glances, silently observing Shu Changfeng, who was stunned and pale-faced. Everyone knew that although my father was the left chancellor and my brother had once served as the crown prince's study companion, with a relationship so close they could share a pair of pants, Shen Changyi and I had never gotten along, and we even fought as children. How could I possibly have feelings for Shen Changyi? My father nearly coughed up blood on the spot and immediately dropped to his knees in fright. "My daughter is unruly," the emperor snapped out of his surprise, glanced discreetly at the crown prince, and then waved his hand with a kind smile. "It's all right. When I was young, I also enjoyed joking with others. What was just said doesn't count." My father, as if granted a great pardon, wiped his cold sweat and repeatedly agreed. "Thank you for your Majesty's great kindness in not punishing my daughter. She is unwell today." I remained silent, watching as Shen Changyi's expression turned from clear to overcast, then grew darker and darker. "Wait." Shen Changyi spoke with a grim face. "How can there be jesting words in the Golden Hall? How can the crown prince of a nation be made a joke of?" My brother raised an eyebrow, making the emperor somewhat awkward and the court officials uncertain. Regardless, he walked toward me as if intending to pull me up from kneeling to receive the marriage edict. I exchanged glances with Shen Changyi and saw his nervous expression. Suddenly recalling the scene I had witnessed after being burned to death in my previous life, when my spirit had attached itself to a locust tree as a lonely ghost, memories of the past flooded my mind, and I felt my body go limp as darkness clouded my vision. I actually fainted right there in the Golden Hall. When I woke up again, I was already back in my own room at the Meng residence. My brother and parents were anxiously waiting by my bedside, and they finally breathed a sigh of relief when they saw me slowly regain consciousness. They immediately called for the physician to check my pulse and had the maid bring me tea and porridge. I then learned that I had been unconscious for a whole day, and it was already midnight. People in the capital all thought I was possessed by a ghost during the court session earlier today, and Shu Changfeng had already visited me once during the day. My mother lovingly patted my head. It's fine if nothing's wrong, even if you spoke nonsense in the Golden Hall, it doesn't matter. Tomorrow, your father will request an imperial decree for your marriage again. Father pretended to stroke his beard sorrowfully. For the sake of our unruly little girl, losing a bit of face doesn't matter. My brother shook his head with a smile, but then he heard me exclaim instinctively, "No, I don't want to marry Shu Changfeng. Tanga, what's happened?" My parents were utterly astonished. And with tears in my eyes, I felt an urge to pour out everything from my past life in that very moment. But the next instant, I caught sight of the grey hairs at my parents' temples, and my throat suddenly went dry. My parents were already past the age of knowing their fate. In my previous life, around this time, they had entrusted me to Shu Changfeng with peace of mind before retiring and returning to their hometown in Yuncheng, never again involving themselves in court affairs. But later, I was powerless. After learning the truth about my brother's death, I had no one to rely on, so I secretly wrote to them, asking them to return to the capital to avenge my brother. But when the Shu residence caught fire, Shu Changfeng abandoned me to save someone else. When I died, I still didn't know if the letter had reached Yun City. It pains me to think of my parents, who served the country diligently for decades, only to have their children meet tragic ends in their old age. I can only imagine how desolate their later years must have been in their previous life. I forced myself to shake my head. It's nothing, it's just, I cannot marry Shu Changfeng now. Father, please do not petition the emperor on my behalf. After all, I wish I could skin him alive and tear out his tendons. My parents were completely baffled, while I glanced at my brother Meng Huaijin, blinked, and forced a relaxed smile. Don't worry, Mom and Dad, rest assured my brother knows about it too. My brother's eyes widened, and he was about to ask me what he knew, but when our parents turned their gaze to him, he immediately composed himself. Tanga has already told me about it. My parents were half convinced, but in the end, they agreed. After they left, my brother knocked on my head and said with exasperation, "All right, what trouble have you gotten me into this time?" But I couldn't hold back my grievances any longer and threw myself into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Brother, it's my fault." I clenched my hands tightly, my hatred and grievances turning into sobs. If I hadn't misjudged people, my brother wouldn't have been pushed off the cliff by that guilty pair of scoundrels in our previous life, ultimately leaving no trace of his remains. My brother was flustered by my crying, hastily trying to comfort me with an anxious expression. "Tanga, what grievance have you suffered? Tell your brother, and I will stand up for you." With tear-filled eyes, I looked up, gritting my teeth in resentment as I spoke. "Brother, everything I'm about to tell you is true. You must believe me. These matters can only be known between the two of us." My brother was taken aback for a moment, then said seriously, "I believe you. On the wedding night of my previous life, I was kidnapped by a woman named Song Anlan." "Who are you?" I asked in terror. But the woman did not answer at all. She wore a mask on her face, revealing only her chin, with red lips slightly curved. She patted my cheek and laughed. "Don't worry, little sister. I only want to be your husband's wife for one night." I was gagged, stripped of my wedding dress by her, dragged behind the screen, and forced to watch as she put on my clothes and sat upright on the bed. Not long after, Shu Changfeng staggered in, clearly intoxicated. Shu Changfeng tried to lift the bridal veil, but a hand stopped him, and then a red silk blindfold covered his eyes. The red candle was blown out by the wind, and the curtain gently fell. I wanted to scream with all my might, but no sound came out, only tears. In the latter half of the night, the woman climbed out the window and left, not forgetting to leave one of her personal garments behind, while Shu Changfeng remained completely unaware, sleeping soundly. My tears had long since soaked my clothes, and the night was cold. I don't remember when I passed out from the chill. I only remember waking up the next day to find Shu Changfeng kneeling before me, his face covered in tears of regret. "Tanga, it's my fault. I actually, actually let that wanton woman. I watched as Shu Changfeng tore the small garment to shreds. Embroidered on it was clearly the character song. This was supposed to be my wedding night, yet it has been completely ruined by some inexplicable woman from the martial world, Changfeng. I must catch her, I choked up, and Shu Changfeng held me in his arms, vowing to avenge me. He begged me not to speak of this matter, and I felt ashamed myself, so I kept it hidden and settled into my role as a wife of the Shu family, marrying the one I had admired since my youth. I thought my life would be happy and peaceful, even though my sister-in-law and mother-in-law were somewhat annoying. My husband was so attentive to me that I didn't feel wronged. But I never expected that this would be the beginning of my misfortune, a journey that would ultimately lead to the destruction of my family and my own death in a fire. I told my brother everything exactly as it happened. At first, my brother was somewhat surprised, but as he listened further, his expression grew increasingly grim. He suddenly seemed to lose his strength and asked me in a dazed and disheartened manner, "How could this be? How could my Tanga have encountered such things? How could I, as your brother, have let you suffer such grievances?" My nose tingled, and I nearly burst into tears again, but I knew now was not the time to cry. "Brother, everything I said is true, this isn't a dream. I also know that you and Shen Changyi are secretly searching for evidence of the Ministry of Works Vice Minister's collusion with the enemy. In my previous life, 1 month after I was granted the marriage, the Vice Minister's family was raided and their property confiscated." My brother was as if struck by lightning, collapsing to the ground. "How does Tanga know? It's true, it's all actually true." My eyes glistened with tears. "Brother, you can go and check. When Shu Changfeng went to provide disaster relief a few months ago, did he disappear for a night? The next day, he was brought back by a woman from the martial world. Tonight is a rainy night, with thunder rumbling outside and the downpour beating noisily against the banana leaves." My brother sat on the ground for a while before slowly getting up. He had regained his composure, walked over to me, gently tucked me in, and comforted me softly, his tone resolute. "Tanga, don't be afraid, I will make them pay with their blood." I nodded. "I will definitely make them pay the price." After comforting me to sleep, my brother returned to his own courtyard with a cold expression. The next day, my father did not request an imperial decree for me. Instead, he brought up the matter of retiring to the emperor. The emperor is reluctant to let my father resign and wants to keep him for a while longer. The same happened in my previous life, but my father still ended up returning to his hometown in the end. The matter of the arranged marriage was left unresolved, but the people in the capital still assume that the Shu and Meng families will eventually form a marriage alliance. The Shu family likely thinks the same way, which is why they only had Shu Changfeng visit me once while I was unconscious, and no one came again after that. These past 2 days, when Shu Changfeng's father encountered my father at court, he would snort coldly in front of their colleagues. Despite holding a much lower official rank, he didn't even bother to salute. Instead, he gave my father a disdainful look and walked away, leaving my father utterly furious. It's as if they're afraid people won't know the Shu family is displeased that I chose Shen Changyi in the Golden Hall. I understand, this is the Shu family's way of putting me in my place, Madame Shu's tactic to control me. They insisted that I personally go to their home to apologize before they would set aside their pride, and only then would Shu Changfeng come to my house to propose marriage. Since the previous life, the Shu family has always had this kind of attitude. My Meng family holds a prominent status. Although my father is about to step down, my brother has a promising political career, and I am one of the top noble ladies in the capital. Marrying into the Shu family was already a step down for me. In my previous life, Mrs. Shu, fearing that I would outshine my in-laws after marriage, began scheming to wear me down early on. Soon after the marriage was arranged, she frequently summoned me to the Shu residence. On the surface, she claimed it was to bond with me, yet each time she dismissed her maids and matrons, leaving me alone to attend to her. I handled all sorts of tasks, from serving tea and water to preparing medicine and cooking. I was pampered since childhood and had never been ordered around like this, but due to my lack of experience, I never suspected anything. Later, Mrs. She would even tell me quite naturally which set of jewelry she had taken a fancy to, and Shu Changfeng's sister, Shu Miue, would put every dress she had made on my account. It wasn't until my brother noticed something was wrong and personally visited, presenting the gold, silver, and jewels they had asked me for right in front of Shu Changfeng. Only then did Shu Changfeng learn of this matter. He became unusually furious and forbade such things from happening again. So in my past life, I trusted Shu Changfeng so deeply, but now that I think about it, it's truly laughable. In this life, no matter how the Shu family tries to manipulate me, I will remain unshaken and let them grow anxious on their own. Thus, the entire Meng family held their ground and deliberately kept the Shu family waiting for some time. Lady Shu gradually grew restless and began inquiring about which family's banquet I would attend, specifically sending Shu Miue to give me a hint. So that day, at the flower appreciation banquet hosted by Jiang Danzhu, the daughter of the Duke of Guo's household, I met Shu Miue. Someone brought her in and eagerly invited her to sit beside me. Aren't you going to hurry and sit next to your future sister-in-law, Meng? All the young ladies present understood the situation and made space for the future sisters-in-law, but Shu Miue sneered coldly, deliberately choosing a spot far away to sit down, rolling her eyes at me. What sister Meng? Since when do I have a sister? No one knew what had happened, so they could only fall silent. I calmly sipped my tea, paying no attention to her. I just found it amusing in my heart, thinking that I had been too easy to bully before, actually spoiling her into such an overbearing manner. Shu Miue, seeing that I ignored her, grew even more displeased. My mother has been suffering from chest pains lately and is already bedridden. It's a pity that she treated some people quite well in the past. Yet now not even a single visit has been paid. Some people may appear gentle, kind, modest, and frugal on the surface, but they are clearly ungrateful and heartless. This is the trick that Madame Shu often used in my previous life, pretending to be ill to order me around. But does she even take a look at her own status? Even with a marriage contract, making a daughter-in-law who hasn't yet married serve her in-laws early is nothing but the behavior of common folks. Not to mention that I currently have no relationship with the Shu family at all. I let out a light laugh, and the noble ladies around me covered their faces and laughed along without saying a word. The sound of laughter made Shu Miue blush with embarrassment, and she angrily scolded those around her. What are you laughing at? What? Do you also think it's shameful and ridiculous to drag the crown prince into this in the Golden Hall? Some people should really take a look at themselves. Their ambitions reach for the heavens, yet their fate is as thin as paper, and they still dare to dream of becoming the crown princess. Hearing this, my close friend from the inner chambers worriedly tightened her grip on my hand, while I slightly cooled my expression. What a fragile life, thinner than paper. I looked coldly at Shu Miue, and she became even more enthusiastic, if it weren't for years of affection. Which man would ever fancy such a woman? They say she's well-read and skilled in both music and chess, but in reality, she's like a stagnant pond, utterly dull and tiresome to look at. It's a pity my brother is so devoted, still waiting for her. In my opinion, he just hasn't met enough people. Who doesn't love a lively and interesting beauty? Some people shouldn't end up regretting it alone later. Shu Miue's eyes and brows were filled with a smile, as if she were immensely proud. It suddenly occurred to me that in my previous life, she had also brought the lively and interesting Song Anlan into the Shu family right under my nose with the same triumphant air. In my previous life, I did not wait for Shu Changfeng to catch the person who had offended me, but instead waited for Shu Miue to bring home a beautiful and carefree young woman. Sister Song is my savior. Now that her family has suddenly encountered misfortune, brother, may I bring her home to stay for a while? When Shu Miue asked Shu Changfeng with a smile, Song Anlan looked at me with amusement. At the time, I didn't understand the mockery and disdain in her eyes, nor did I notice Shu Changfeng's unusual behavior. In the end, Shu Changfeng reluctantly agreed, but he arranged for Song Anlan to stay in the courtyard farthest from mine. After she moved into the residence, my life became a bit more difficult. Old Lady Shu was very fond of Song Anlan and even once publicly suggested taking her as Shu Changfeng's concubine. My face naturally darkened, and Shu Changfeng firmly refused on the spot. even threatening to force Song Anlan to move out, but Shu Miyue absolutely refused to agree. I knew she would be delighted if someone could cause trouble for me. Not long after the imperial edict of the arranged marriage was issued, I accidentally caught her eloping with a poor scholar and stopped them out of concern. The Shu family was furious, and naturally, her relationship with that scholar came to an end. Shu Miyue has hated me ever since. At that time, apart from Shu Changfeng, I had no confidants in the Shu residents. Old Lady Shu constantly suppressed me, and Shu Miyue took pleasure in this, often adding fuel to the fire. As for that Miss Song, though she appeared bold and unrestrained, I always felt uncomfortable with the way she looked at me. I placed all my hopes on Shu Changfeng, waiting for the day he would be assigned a post outside the capital, so he could take me away from the Shu residence and we could live our own lives in some prefecture or county. But the good times didn't last long. A great flood struck the Shu region, and the emperor sent my brother and Shu Changfeng together to provide disaster relief. The disaster was severe, and the two of them did not return for months. One day, Miss Song from the mansion also disappeared without a trace. Finally, the disaster relief efforts came to an end, but only Shu Changfeng and Song Anlan returned. They said my brother had encountered a flood while providing relief and was gone. Nonsense. How could something have happened to my brother? When I first heard the news, I was so furious my eyes nearly split open, and I simply couldn't believe it. How could someone as outstanding as my brother, a true dragon among men and heaven's favored one, possibly perish on a disaster relief mission? Shu Changfeng held me tightly, tears streaming down his face as he urged me to accept reality, saying that even if my brother was gone, I still had him. How can one easily let go when a loved one passes away? I fell seriously ill, spending my days in tears and feeling utterly dejected. It wasn't until I saw the message that my brother's old servant, with his last breath, managed to deliver to me. The letter said that my brother was killed by Song Anlan. He was helping with disaster relief alongside Shu Changfeng, and one day when he returned to his residence, he saw something that made him extremely angry. That evening, he was invited out, taking only 2 attendants with him. However, he did not return for a long time. When the old servant went to search for him, he couldn't find my brother but instead saw Song Anlan disposing of a body in the floodwaters. She sneered as she disposed of the attendant's body. Blame yourselves for following the wrong person, who told Meng Huaijin that he was destined to die. The old servant was greatly shocked and intended to report it to Shu Changfeng, but he never expected that Song Anlan had no intention of sparing him either. His food was poisoned, and although he feigned death to escape, his days were numbered. With his last breath before dying, he managed to pass the message to me. Now, the Meng family in the capital has only the young lady left. Please be extra careful. I received the news on a stormy night with roaring thunder, overwhelming pain, and rage threatened to drown me. I couldn't believe my brother had been murdered, and the killer was still living in the Shu residence. I forced myself to get up from the bed, hastily threw on an outer robe, and hurried to the study to find Shu Changfeng, who was still handling official duties. Now I have no one to rely on, and relying solely on myself. It is far too difficult to make the murderer pay with blood, and my husband is powerful and influential, and we trust each other. He will surely share my pain and join me in seeking revenge. I plan to first work with Changfeng to trap Song Anlan in the Shu residence, since she has no one to depend on here. As long as she can't escape, I will make her pay with her life for my brother. In the heavy rain at night, I stumbled and staggered to the door of the study. The door was not closed tightly, and a warm yellow light shone through, which slightly calmed my heart. Trembling, I reached out and touched the door frame. Crying, I was so aggrieved, so anxious, and so trusting of my husband, coming to him with the pain of losing a loved one. Before I could fully push the door open, I had already caught a glimpse of Shu Changfeng through the crack. He was disheveled, trapping Song Anlan between him and the desk. The rain was pouring heavily outside. I saw Song Anlan shoot him a reproachful glare. We're still in the study. Shu Changfeng's breathing grew heavier, but he refused to let go of Song Anlan. Her hand soothingly stroked his forehead as she spoke with deep affection. All right, I know you still can't forget our wedding night. I'd like to be your wife too. So when exactly are you going to drive Meng wanting out of the mansion? She really is as annoying as her short-lived brother, isn't she? Thunder rumbled incessantly, and lightning illuminated the night as bright as day. I watched helplessly as my husband was unfaithful with another woman. The icy rain soaked through my clothes, yet I seemed to feel nothing. I want them all to pay with their lives for my brother. Like a walking corpse, I returned to my own courtyard, unable to sleep all night, with only this one thought in my mind. The next day, I developed a high fever but still refused to rest in bed. Shu Changfeng tried to comfort me with concern, but the moment he touched me, I couldn't help but start vomiting. I wrote to my parents, using my illness as an excuse to leave the estate to purchase medicinal herbs, while secretly searching for evidence of Shu Changfeng's misconduct in his study at night. I am waiting for my parents to return to the capital. My father has students all over the country, and only he can ruin Shu Changfeng's career, ensuring that the Shu family never rises again in the capital. I want them to be disgraced and die in agony. Even if I die along with them, it doesn't matter. But I had only just begun to poison them, and my letters had not yet been delivered when a fire broke out in the Shu residence. The flames filled the sky, and the houses were burned to ashes. Trapped in the fire, I watched it all unfold, feeling nothing but absurd amusement. Why is heaven treating me this way? Good people die unjustly, while the wicked live 100 years. Song Anlan, who was trapped in the fire with me, was extremely anxious, tearing at my hair and cursing loudly. You jinx, I knew nothing good would come from being around you. It's so noisy. I took out the dagger I had been hiding on me and, under her disbelieving gaze, stabbed her fiercely. Even if I die today, I cannot let Song Anlan live in peace. After I die and become a vengeful ghost, I will come for Shu Changfeng to settle the score. Song Anlan, having roamed the martial world, was naturally stronger than me. She quickly reacted, enduring the intense pain as she pulled out the dagger and lunged at me with venomous hatred. You wretch, how dare you? As we struggled, we knocked over many burning objects. My body was seared with unbearable pain, but in my heart, I felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. Song Anlan was lying on the ground, bleeding heavily and on the verge of death. I had also been stabbed and was lying weakly in the corner. Just when I thought everything was over, Shu Changfeng rushed anxiously into the fire, looking around, and finally discovered the unconscious Song Anlan. In the end, I watched helplessly as he picked her up, while the burning beam fell, crushing my waist, and I never woke up again. I fell into the memories of my past life, as if flames appeared before my eyes again, and my nostrils were filled with choking smoke and dust. With a sharp crack, the sound of a cup hitting the table jolted me awake. The person who smashed the cup had an expression full of arrogance, sneering lightly at the smug Shu Miue, their phoenix eyes slightly raised. Their tone was dripping with sarcasm. What kind of joke am I hearing? Shu Miue, your brother is just a minor official, yet he dares to boss around the daughter of the Prime Minister's household. Who does he think he is? I wouldn't even want him as a live-in son-in-law for my Duke of Ronggua's residence. Is your Shu family imperial relatives or descendants of royalty? You, the daughter of a mere fifth-rank official, dare to cause trouble in my Duke of Ronggua's residence? Among all the noble ladies present today, is there anyone whose slap you would dare to talk back to? Shu Miue was furious. She stood up and angrily pointed at Jiang Danzhu. You, Jiang Danzhu curled her lips nonchalantly, suddenly stood up, walked over to her, and gave her a hard slap across the face. Shu Miue hadn't even recovered from being hit when a cup of hot tea was poured over her head. Jiang Danzhu, she screamed hysterically, but no one around stepped forward to speak up for her. After all, no one dared to provoke Jiang Danzhu. Shu Miue fled the banquet in a flustered and hurried manner. Watching her panicked retreat, the corner of my lips curved slightly. Shu Miue, what does enduring a little anger mean? I will make your Shu family pay with blood for blood. This is just the appetizer. I was wrong. I shouldn't have let my mind be disturbed by your few words. I, Meng Wantang, have survived death calamities and even wandered as a lonely ghost. If in my previous life I hadn't realized the truth too late and trusted Shu Changfeng too much, I would have made the Shu family and Song Anlan taste the bitterness of losing their families and being unable to die. I withdrew my gaze. While Jiang Danju leisurely returned to her seat, glaring at me with her beautiful eyes, she had just finished scolding Xu Miue, and immediately turned her anger on me with frustration. Pathetic, getting upset over a man. She had mistaken my earlier distraction for heartache over Xu Changfeng. I suddenly felt a bit touched, smiled, and poured her a cup of tea. Jiang Danju picked it up and drank it in one gulp, still not appeased. What is Xu Changfeng? You are the daughter of the Prime Minister's household. What kind of man can't you find? If I were you, I would never have pretended to faint out of fear in the Golden Hall. I would have boldly accepted that imperial decree appointing me as the crown princess. Her scolding made my face flush with heat. Knowing she didn't want to see me in such low spirits, I replied softly, "Good Danju, I really didn't pretend to faint, my body just failed me. If I had been conscious, would I have been afraid of the crown prince? You know how we've been quarreling since we were children. If he dares to marry me, I dare to marry him. If I had been awake, I would certainly have accepted that imperial decree. He, Shen Chang'e, would have no choice but to obediently become my humble servant. After all, it was Shen Chang'e from my previous life who built the cenotaph for me and wept drunkenly before my grave. In my past life, after I died, I didn't immediately reincarnate. Instead, I drifted in a daze, attaching myself to the large locust tree in the courtyard of the Meng residence. Shen Chang'e, who had left the capital to guard the border after my grand wedding, returned to the capital upon my death. As I recalled these events from my past life, the corners of my mouth unconsciously lifted. I was just about to continue speaking with Jiang Danju when I noticed her stiff expression as she stared behind me, her dissatisfaction frozen on her face. The surroundings were also very quiet. "What's wrong with you?" I reached out and waved my hand in front of her eyes, but then I felt someone grab the back of my collar. Turning to look, it was actually Shen Chang'e. He stood behind me with a half-smile, his eyes filled with complex emotions. I coughed lightly, pretending as if nothing was amiss. "Your Highness is also attending the banquet. What a coincidence." "Not a coincidence. I came specifically for you. After all, I am your devoted admirer." Shen Chang'e let out a cold snort. "It's been 3 days since we last met, and you truly make me see you in a new light." My face flushed with heat again. He had actually heard everything. The crowd dared not speak, as they lacked influential family backgrounds and couldn't be sure they'd escape the crown prince's wrath if they spoke up. But just when they thought I was surely doomed for the day, Shen Chang'e suddenly laughed, casually tossed out a remark, and strode away. "Wait." The crowd was somewhat baffled, but shortly after the banquet ended, Shen Chang'e did something that shook the entire capital. That morning, the old butler of the crown prince's residence arrived at the Meng family's doorstep, smiling as he presented the betrothal gifts and the jade bracelet, a token passed down only to the crown princess. "The crown prince has instructed that if Miss Meng does not accept them, they are to be thrown away directly." My father was greatly alarmed. Who would dare throw these things away, especially since there was a family heirloom jade bracelet inside? "Your Highness, what is going on? Both of you, explain this to me clearly." My father glared at my brother and me, his beard bristling with anger. My brother and I exchanged glances but remained silent. He had no choice but to order someone to carefully store the items, and then he went to the palace in his official robes to see the emperor. My brother shook his head with a smile and pulled me into the courtyard. "Tanga, tell me clearly, do you truly like Shen Chang'e? That day, when you suddenly returned to the time of the imperial marriage decree, you had no other choice and selected the crown prince. That was understandable. But now, do you truly wish to become the crown princess?" My brother looked at me very seriously. "Tanga, if you seek revenge, you don't need the position of crown princess. Our Meng family is more than capable. I have no other wishes, only that you live in peace and happiness. If you make a mistake now and regret it later, the loss will outweigh the gain. The Shu and Song Anlan families are not worth you doing this. Even if you don't marry, the Meng family can ensure you a worry-free life for the rest of your days." I smiled and said, "Brother, you only ask me, but you don't mention Shen Chang'e. Did you already know that he has liked me since we were children?" My brother was taken aback for a moment, then nodded with a helpless smile. He and the Crown Prince have been close friends for many years, so of course he knew everything clearly. It's just that I had never had any feelings for Shinchang-yi before. In fact, we would argue every time we met. Naturally, he wouldn't force Shinchang-yi's feelings on me. I walked to the window, gazed at the clear, blue sky, and said softly, if I were to speak of the past. I truly never paid any attention to Shinchang-yi, but it was only after I became a wandering ghost in my previous life that I gradually came to understand his sincerity. Back then, I had just died and hadn't been able to reincarnate. In a daze, I attached myself to the large locust tree in the Meng family courtyard, unable to remember anything. Each day, my heart was filled with hatred from who knows where, yet I kept encountering one person. He would always climb over the wall into the Meng residence in the middle of the night and sit under the locust tree drinking. He always talks about a brother and sister from the Meng family, sharing many stories from their childhood. The brother was his close friend, and the sister was the one he loved. He said he shouldn't have left the capital in a fit of sorrow. Otherwise, he wouldn't have returned only to find that his friend had been murdered and the woman he loved had died in a fire. He said his father accused him of abusing his power for personal gain, but he still made life very difficult for Xu Changfeng in the official circles. He is still investigating the truth, determined to make sure the murderer ends up with no place to be buried. One day he came with someone, said to be that good friend of his, who it turned out hadn't died but had injured both legs. That friend touched the locust tree and said it was the oldest tree in the Meng residence, and that his younger sister loved climbing it the most when they were children. This person felt very familiar to me, making me both happy and sad, and it made me want to drive both of them away. After some more time, the last time I remember seeing that person, he came with a jug of wine, got drunk under the locust tree, and even poured some wine on the tree, saying he wanted to give the locust tree a drink. I'm a bit angry because I can smell the aroma of wine but can't drink it. For the first time, I leaned in to take a closer look at the drunk man. He was murmuring someone's name, saying he wanted to see her again. When I clearly heard the name, a flash of white light appeared before my eyes. When I opened them again, I was already back in the Golden Hall. Brother. The days attached to the locust tree were so lonely, it only got lively when he came at night. I chuckled softly. I probably liked him even when I was a ghost, but back then I was in a daze, just waiting for him to come every night. My brother didn't speak for a while, and when I looked again, his eyes were filled with tears. Tanger, things will be better from now on, father, mother, and I will never leave you again. My father entered the palace in a daze to meet the emperor and returned just as bewildered, stroking his beard. He spoke to my mother, feeling that he might just become the emperor's father-in-law. My mother remarked that our daughter was truly impressive and had brought honor to the family. The people in the capital didn't know the truth. They only knew that the crown prince had forcibly delivered the betrothal gifts to the Meng residents. Jiang Danju sent me a letter through a messenger, on which were only 4 boldly written characters, a role model for our generation. At that moment, Xu Changfeng came to the Meng residence to find me. My brother stood by the door with a stern expression, blocking him from approaching me. Xu Changfeng frowned, somewhat puzzled, but didn't dwell on it too much. Instead, he looked at me earnestly. Tang Tang, can we talk? My brother pushed me back into the mansion and spoke coldly to Xu Changfeng. Our Tanger has nothing to discuss with you. Xu Changfeng grew somewhat angry and said urgently, Tang Tang. I turned around and nodded. All right, let's talk. My brother glared at me and walked straight out of the mansion. Xu Changfeng and I went to a nearby tea house. It had been a while since we last met, and he looked somewhat tired, with dark circles under his eyes. Someone who was once as refreshing and bright as a clear breeze now appeared haggard and fragile. He forced a faint smile. It seems like it's been a while since we last met. My mother wouldn't let me come to see you, but I've been wanting to ask, how is your health? I was very worried when you fainted in the Golden Hall that day. I stared at him steadily and let out a light scoff. So just because she told you not to come, you didn't, Xu Changfeng. Do you know why Madame Xu doesn't want you to come to see me? Xu Changfeng fell silent for a moment, then spoke with difficulty, clearly embarrassed. I know, but I can't defy her. I laughed, suddenly feeling utterly absurd. it turned out that Shu Changfeng, in both lifetimes, had known all along about Madame Shu's suppression of me, yet chose to turn a blind eye. You knew all along that the Shu family was trying to intimidate me. Well, Shu Changfeng, who do you think you've been fair to? I slammed the cup heavily on the table, no longer wanting to keep up the act with him, and stood up to leave. Shu Changfeng grew agitated, grabbing my sleeve, his voice filled with pain. Tang Tang. Don't go, I'm just so worried that I'm acting rashly. He shook his head, the corners of his eyes reddening. They say you're a noble lady from a prestigious family. I know I'm reaching above my station, and I have selfish motives. I just want to keep you by my side. Tang Tang, I'm begging you. Can you stay and talk with me for a while? I'm really hurting right now. Shu Changfeng smiled bitterly. Did you know, something happened to the Shu family? Last night, Xiaoye didn't return home. And her parents were extremely worried. They didn't dare to search for her openly, but everyone in the household went out to look. By the time they found her, it was already too late. Xiaoye and that man were already lying together in the same bed. Mother fainted as soon as she found out. And father was angrier than I've ever seen him. The Shu family is desperately trying to keep the news under wraps, but with so many people present, it's impossible to hide. The Shu household is in complete chaos. He looked utterly devastated and somewhat pitiful. I don't know what to do. I just wanted to see you. Seeing you makes me feel a little more at ease. I almost burst out laughing. Shu Changfeng naturally had no idea what to do, because in the previous life, I was the one who stopped Shu Miue from eloping, and I was the one who spent a fortune to cover up the news. But in the end, the Shu family repaid me with harsh treatment and a great fire. Last night, I was fully aware of Shu Miue's elopement with someone, and I even ensured their escape went smoothly. But that's not enough, Shu Changfeng. I still have to settle accounts with you and Song Anlan. And Shu Changfeng, completely unaware, continued to speak. Tang Tang, you are all I have now. I was growing a bit impatient and was about to leave when someone suddenly burst through the door. He stood there with a sword at his waist, let out a scornful laugh, and spoke in a low tone. Crown Princess. Who are you having tea with? Why didn't you invite me? I calmly took a sip of tea. I knew Shen Changyi would come uninvited. After all, my brother wouldn't let me stay alone with Shu Changfeng for too long. He must have left the residence earlier to call for someone. Shen Changyi didn't stand on ceremony either. He grabbed my wrist and strode out the main door, but Shu Changfeng quickly caught up, his brows and eyes filled with anger. What does the Crown Prince mean by this? Where are you taking Tang Tang? Shen Changyi turned to look at him, his phoenix eyes slightly raised, his posture condescending, and he arrogantly retorted, Do I need to report the Crown Princess's whereabouts to you? The undisguised contempt in the words made him clench his teeth, under Shen Changyi's disdainful gaze. Shu Changfeng suddenly let out a light laugh. Your Highness, the Crown Prince, naturally has no need to report to your humble servant. However, in the Golden Hall, Tang Tang did not accept the imperial decree appointing her as the Crown Princess. The betrothal gifts and tokens were also sent by your Highness to the Meng residence on your own accord, unrelated to anyone else. Tang Tang and your Highness have neither the parent's command nor the matchmaker's words, let alone a childhood bond or mutual affection. Is your Highness attempting to forcibly seize another man's wife? He raised his voice, making sure everyone in the tea house could hear him clearly. No one dared to interrupt. A flicker of pain passed through Shen Changyi's eyes, for he knew Shu Changfeng's words were true. Childhood sweethearts referred to Shu Changfeng and me, while lifelong discord described Shen Changyi and me. Mutual affection was shared between Shu Changfeng and me, while the heartache belonged to Shen Changyi alone. I felt Shen Changyi's grip on my wrist loosen slightly, yet he still couldn't bring himself to let go. I lowered my gaze and pulled away. He seemed taken aback for a moment, as if wanting to hold me back, but ultimately let go. Shu Changfeng raised an eyebrow, his eyes brimming with smug satisfaction as a smile spread across his face. But I spoke up. I have no parental decree or matchmaker's arrangement with you, nor do we share years of affection or vows of eternal love. So how can I be called your subject's wife? I, Meng Wanting, am not the Crown Princess, nor am I your wife. I am simply Meng Wanting. These words struck Shu Changfeng like a thunderclap. the color drained from his face, his body trembled slightly, and he stared at me in disbelief. Lips parted but unable to utter a word. Through him, I seemed to see my past self, the one betrayed by Shu Changfeng, equally shattered. I turned to leave Shu Changfeng standing there dumbstruck, passing by Shen Changyi. I noticed he was still frozen in place and whispered, "Let's go. Didn't my brother send your highness to the tea house to bring me back to the residence?" The next day, just as I had risen in the morning, the maid came to report, "Miss, young Master Shu sent someone with a message, saying he is waiting for you at the back door." A cold glint flashed in my eyes. "Tell him I won't see him." The maid hesitated. "He said if you don't go, he will keep waiting, then let him wait." I casually replied and went to the study to discuss matters with my brother. In the study, my brother had been waiting for me for a while. When he saw me arrive, he gave a faint smile and then spoke. "Tanga, you mentioned before that Song Anlan is the daughter of the female head escort of the Xingqing escort agency. I looked into it further and found that this escort agency is somewhat suspicious." He handed me the collected information and then continued speaking. "This security agency is small, but it always manages to secure good contracts that even the larger agencies can't get. Moreover, while there are often conflicts among the major security agencies, this Xingqing security agency is the only one that no one dares to provoke. It must have powerful backing." By the time my brother finished speaking, I had also skimmed through the gathered information and gasped in shock, completely astonished. "Are you saying that the female head of the security agency is actually the long-lost childhood sweetheart that the Duke of Rong has been yearning for all these years?" Duke Rong, Jiang Mu, had always been known for his loyalty and integrity. For over a decade, he had only the Duchess as his official wife and never took any concubines. Unexpectedly, he was not as rumored to have fallen in love with the Duchess at first sight. Many years ago, he and Song Anlan's mother were childhood sweethearts. But they were forcibly separated by their families and ended up living far apart, each marrying someone else. However, Duke Rong never forgot her. Coincidentally, 3 years ago, Song Anlan's father passed away, and her mother returned to the capital with her. Duke Rong then rekindled his relationship with her behind the Duchess's back. Song Anlan's mother became the mistress of the Duke of Rongwa, and even Song Anlan was loved along with her, in just 3 years. She was spoiled beyond measure. My brother nodded, looking somewhat grave. "And you mentioned before that in your previous life, Song Anlan moved into the Shu family because of a family incident. I suspect that the escort leader was discovered by the Duchess at that time, which is why the escort agency met with misfortune." A sudden idea struck me. That's right, not long after she moved in during my previous life, I heard that the Duke of Rongwa and the Duchess had divorced. I slammed the message on the table angrily. Are there so few good men left in this world? Think back to when the Jiang family was implicated in the conspiracy case and the whole family was thrown into the imperial prison. If it weren't for the Duchess and her family's strong support, how could he have come this far? My brother patted my shoulder to calm me down. That's exactly what I think. Moreover, the Duchess's maternal family still holds considerable influence today. The Duchess comes from a military family and has a strong, unyielding character. If she chose to divorce him in the previous life, she would surely do the same in this life. With the Duke of Rong present, we cannot rashly take action against the Xingqing escort agency. But if the Duchess is involved, why not join forces with Jiang Danju? Without delay, I decided to go find Jiang Danju immediately. Just as I was about to leave, the maid came to report again. "Miss, young Master Shu has left. He said he would visit another day." Seeing that I didn't respond, the maid hesitated for a moment before speaking again. Just now, a woman in a red dress came by. Seeing young Master Shu waiting at the back gate of the Meng residence and refusing to leave, she became very angry. She wanted to draw her sword to drive him away but accidentally tore her own dress. So, young Master Shu draped his outer robe over her. And then, I waved my hand to interrupt her. "It's fine, from now on. There's no need to report such trivial matters to me. If anyone lingers at the back gate of the Meng residence and refuses to leave, just report them to the authorities." Jiang Danju was very pleased to see me and immediately ordered the servants to bring out the finest tea. What brings you here today? Instead of being all lovey-dovey with your crown prince brother, you actually remembered me." I smiled and was about to hit her. "My dear Danju, I would never forget you. No matter who else I might forget." After the pleasantries were over, it was time to get down to business, but looking at Jiang Danju's carefree appearance, I suddenly felt a bit reluctant. She noticed something was wrong and her expression turned more serious as she asked, "What's the matter? If there's something, just say it directly." I suddenly remembered that in my previous life, after the Duchess had separated from her husband, she remained despondent for quite some time, but later, Danju resolutely took the Duchess and left the capital, saying they needed to leave the place of heartbreak and not be trapped by the past. She bid me farewell before leaving, so carefree and unrestrained. Danju has always been a resilient woman from start to finish. Why should I hem and haw, as if looking down on her? I passed along the information my brother had gathered and spoke up. "I'm not afraid of you laughing at me. Even before I broke up with Xu Changfeng, he had already been entangled with a woman from the martial world." Jiang Danju frowned. "What a shameless pair." I sighed. "I, Meng Wantang, am no pushover either. But the more I investigate this woman, the more suspicious I find her. Danju, you need to be prepared. See for yourself." Jiang Danju took the message with some confusion, reading it word by word, but her expression grew increasingly grim. In the end, she even slammed her fist heavily onto the redwood table. Her phoenix eyes brimmed with tears, and her voice cracked instantly. "How outrageous! Tanga, where did you get this from?" I held her hand and spoke in a lowered voice. "All of this is information my brother gathered, and it's likely 90% accurate. Don't panic, you can verify it first. Once it's confirmed, it won't be too late to make a decision." Jiang Danju shook her head, and after a long while, a single clear tear fell. "I already have an idea in my heart. Many of the things mentioned here can be connected to my father. I just need some time to process it." She leaned weakly against me. "Tanga, this matter is of great importance. I must let my mother know. Will you come with me? Consider it as keeping me company. I'm afraid I won't be able to handle it alone." I agreed. When I returned home, the spy I had planted reported that the Shu family was planning to quickly marry off Shu Miue before the news of her situation could spread. The scholar was too poor, and the Shu family was determined not to have him as a live-in son-in-law. I laughed and said, trying to cover it up, "How could I let you have your way? If the scandal hasn't spread widely enough, I'll just give it a little push." At the same time, I was also planning other things. In my previous life, after I caught Song Anlan and Xu Changfeng in the act of adultery, I went into hiding for a while, solely to gather evidence of Xu Changfeng's misconduct as an official. However, although he was a terrible person, he was relatively upright as an official. But I still managed to get an unexpected surprise. Xu Changfeng wasn't corrupt, but his father was someone who loved to scheme and manipulate. After a lifetime, these past events should also see the light of day again. Not long after, Jiang Danju invited me into the Duke's residence once more for a private conversation. This time, she appeared much calmer and more rational. "Tanga, I asked you here today to discuss my mother's and my plans. My mother is determined to divorce that scoundrel." I nodded. The Duchess is as resolute as ever. Over the years, the Jiang family's interests have become so intertwined with ours that pulling one thread affects the whole web. It will take some time for Mother and me to completely extricate ourselves, but we certainly won't let that scoundrel and his mistress get off easily. That's why I want to make such plans with you. After discussing for a while, I bid farewell to Danju and returned home. Though my parents were away, there was a guest at our residence today, Shen Changyi, who was waiting with my brother for my return to have dinner together. After finishing the meal, my brother made an excuse to go to the study and sent me to accompany Shen Changyi for a stroll in the courtyard. In fact, since childhood, Shen Changyi had visited countless times and was already very familiar with the place, yet I still led him to the largest locust tree in the Meng family courtyard. I gently touched the rough bark. In my previous life, I had been mindlessly attached to its branches in just this way. "This locust tree," Shen Changyi suddenly spoke up. Also reaching out to touch the tree trunk. "Why does it suddenly feel so familiar to me? How strange." I let out a light chuckle. Of course it's familiar, didn't you cry and make a scene under this tree countless times in your past life? Shen Changyi's ears turned slightly red from my laughter. He cleared his throat lightly, adopting a more serious tone. His Majesty was overjoyed to hear that the Meng family has accepted the betrothal gifts. He ordered the imperial astronomers to select an auspicious date, and the wedding has been set for 2 months from now. If you feel it's too rushed, I can have them change it. I turned around and wrapped my arms around his neck. Caught off guard, Shen Changyi was pulled close by me, his face flushing deeply. I don't have any objections, but why don't you ask me why I've changed my mind and want to become your crown princess? He fell silent, unwilling to speak. It wasn't that I didn't want to, but rather that I didn't dare. In the past, I liked Xu Changfeng so much that I couldn't even see him. Over all these years, he had long grown accustomed to it. If there was even a sliver of a chance to grasp, he would never give up, no matter the reason. All that mattered was seizing the present moment. Seeing Shen Changyi like this, my nose tingled with emotion, and I nuzzled my head against his chest. Shen Changyi, I genuinely like you, not because of anyone or anything else. You might not understand it now, but in time, you will come to see it clearly. Shen Changyi gazed at me, emotions swirling in his eyes, until he could no longer restrain himself and finally leaned in to kiss me. I will wait patiently. When I saw Jiang Danju again, she had somehow managed to become friends with Song Anlan. She invited me for tea and spoke to Song Anlan with a beaming smile. Come, Anlan, meet my good friend from the capital. Song Anlan sat upright, her red robes fluttering. Bright and flamboyant, her gaze toward me subtle. Oh, so this is the Miss Meng who looked down on young Master Xu. She seems, she let out a light, ambiguous hum, quite different from a woman of the martial world like me. Facing my enemy from a past life, my hands were clenched tightly under the table, yet my expression remained exceedingly gentle. Miss Song, what are you saying? Mr. Xu and I are already a thing of the past, with no further connection. There's no need to belittle yourself. Those in the martial world are often free-spirited. Since Danju regards you as an honored guest, you must have exceptional qualities. Song Anlan revealed a faint smile, tilting her head slightly upward as if she was quite pleased. Miss Meng, you flatter me. I, Song Anlan, live my life by the principle of repaying kindness and grudges with swiftness. What I want, I will take, even if I have to seize it by force. She spoke with hidden meanings, but I turned a deaf ear to them. The tea gathering didn't last long before it ended. Before Song Anlan left, Jiang Danju still graciously helped her secure several escort agency orders. After she had gone, Jiang Danju dug her fingernails into her palm, her tone gloomy. Tanga, do you know how happy my father was when he found out I became friends with Song Anlan? He was so sure that my mother and I wouldn't notice. Yesterday while drinking, he even said that since it's rare for me to have such a close friend, why not have my mother adopt Song Anlan as her goddaughter? That old man really has no shame. Since that's the case, I will certainly make their wish come true. When I returned to the residence for dinner, the maid brought several letters. Miss, these are all from young Master Xu. He said even if you just open one to take a look, it would be enough. I'm a bit annoyed. No need to keep it. Take it away and burn it. But when the maid was halfway there, I called her back. Wait, no need to burn it. Keep it safe for now. My brother watched with a faint smile, didn't interfere, and just started talking to me about the Xu family. The rumors you had spread a few days ago have already circulated. The Xu family's desperate hope to marry off their daughter has now been shattered. And that scholar is bound to become the Xu family's son-in-law. I nodded and chuckled lightly. Having suffered such a silent loss, the Xu family must be in a state of chaos. But this level of trouble is still not enough. We can also start submitting memorials about Xu Changfeng's father embezzling funds for personal gain. Brother, you must not handle this matter yourself. My brother served me a piece of fish. Don't worry, I already have a plan. I continued with my meal and sighed leisurely. I want to slowly drive them to a dead end without them even realizing it. In the days that followed, Jiang Danju continued to feign friendship with Song Anlan, while the Duchess, unbeknownst to the Duke, gradually took control of the shops, lands, and servants' contracts of the Duke's estate. Jiang Danju and Song Anlan grew closer and closer. During one occasion when I was invited to admire flowers together, Song Anlan bumped into the maid beside me as she stood up. Oops, the next moment. A letter written by Xu Changfeng fell out. Song Anlan immediately grabbed the letter, and upon seeing the familiar handwriting, her face instantly turned extremely grim. I anxiously tried to snatch it back. Thank you, Miss Song. This servant is too careless, it actually fell out, but she held on tightly, refusing to let go, her eyes blazing with a fury that seemed ready to devour me. Meng Wanting, didn't you say you and Xu Changfeng were long over? You already have the crown prince. So what is the meaning of this? A cold expression crossed my face. Miss Song, why do you care what I do? Who I associate with is none of your business. Song Anlan was so furious she wanted to draw her sword. Jiang Danju stood up and subtly blocked her, then began to scold me. Tanger, since you already have the crown prince, how can you still be entangled with Xu Changfeng, who told him to be so stubborn? I merely accepted his letter to fulfill his infatuation. Jiang Danju. Mind your own business. I was about to snatch the letter from Song Anlan's hand, but she tore it into pieces. Seeing this, I pretended to be furious and stormed off in a huff. As I was leaving, Jiang Danju quietly exchanged a glance with me. It was time to take action against the Xingqing escort agency. When Song Anlan came to see Jiang Danju again, she seemed distracted. Jiang Danju showed concern, made her a cup of tea, and asked with worry, what happened? You don't seem to be in a good mood, maybe I can help. Song Anlan brushed it off with a few words. It's nothing, there's a bit of trouble with the family business. If it really can't be resolved, my father will handle it. Jiang Danju's eyes turned cold for a moment, then she smiled again and said, speaking of which, the Xu family has some happy news recently. Song Anlan's eyes lit up, and she quickly pressed for more details. After all, recently, Xu Changfeng had been overwhelmed with the mess at home and was thoroughly annoyed by her pestering. He had been avoiding her, and she simply couldn't get close to him lately. Not to mention that day when she questioned Xu Changfeng about why he wrote to that wretched woman from the Meng family. He even lost his temper with her. Could it be that she really couldn't crack this tough nut? Xu Changfeng. She refused to believe it. Seeing Song Anlan interested, Jiang Danju leisurely began to speak. The second daughter of the Xu family is going to marry a poor scholar, and the Xu family is busy preparing for it. I heard that the Xu family originally strongly disapproved of the scholar, but later they changed their attitude. Song Anlan narrowed her eyes and asked as if casually, why is that? Of course. It's because the second daughter of the Xu family has already consummated her relationship with the scholar. Everyone in the capital knows about it. So the Xu family has no choice but to accept it. Song Anlan's eyes flickered, and Jiang Danju seized the opportunity to press further, bringing up another matter. Speaking of which, I haven't seen what that scholar looks like yet, but in 3 days, the Marquis of Yong'an will be celebrating his 60th birthday, and many noble families in the capital have been invited. The entire Xu family will be there, so I'll naturally get a chance to see him then. Before she could finish, Song Anlan grabbed her hand, showing an unusual excitement. Danju, as a woman from the martial world, I've never attended such a grand nobleman's birthday banquet. Could you take me along to broaden my horizons? Jiang Danju hesitated. But, I can disguise myself as your maid and sneak in. Once I'm inside, it has nothing to do with you anymore. I promise I won't run around. Alright. After Song Anlan left, I stepped out from behind the screen. Jiang Danju was gritting her teeth while wiping the spot on her hand where Song Anlan had grabbed her, then looked up and asked me, this Song Anlan, would she really force herself on Xu Changfeng? Most likely, I calmly analyzed. Recently, Xu Changfeng has been overwhelmed with the Xu family's affairs and has been avoiding her. Last time, she was provoked by my letter, and now with the trouble at the escort agency, she can only grow more anxious. Besides, a woman who would kidnap the bride on her wedding night and have an affair with someone else's husband, how could she possibly care about her reputation? She would be more than happy for everyone to know that she and Xu Changfeng had already consummated their relationship. That way, Xu Changfeng would be hers for sure. Jiang Danju sneered. I don't care whether she actually does it or not. Now that my mother holds the authority in the Duke's mansion, I have nothing to fear. I will make sure they are utterly disgraced." On the day of the birthday banquet, Shu Changfeng sat among the talented young men, his mind wandering. The days of hard work had left him somewhat weary, but the thought of that person's appearance today made him force himself to stay alert. He refused to believe that over a decade of friendship could vanish overnight. There must be some misunderstanding. And he only wanted to ask for clarification. Suddenly, the young attendant serving tea accidentally knocked over the teapot, splashing scalding tea all over his clothes. "Brother Shu, are you all right? You little brat, are you blind? Looking for death, aren't you?" The child quickly knelt down and kowtowed. "Please spare me. My lord, I didn't mean to. Please be merciful and let me go." Shu Changfeng's temples were throbbing with pain, and he didn't want to scold further. So he waved his hand and said it was nothing. The child cautiously asked, "Lord Shu, shall I take you to change into some dry clothes?" Shu Changfeng nodded, stood up, and followed the young servant, leaving the lively banquet behind as they made their way to a quiet room. The young servant invited him to enter and waited outside the door. Without giving it much thought, Shu Changfeng pushed the door open and went in to change his clothes. Halfway through changing, he began to feel increasingly dizzy and feverish, his forehead burning hot. Could it be that the continuous hard work has made him ill? He wanted to call out to the young servant at the door, but there was no response. The young servant had already left. Shu Changfeng endured the discomfort, changed his clothes, and tried to leave, but his legs gave way beneath him. When he pushed the door to go out, he found it wouldn't budge. Just as he began to feel truly uneasy, a woman in a red dress suddenly climbed in through the window, smiling at him, her red lips curved into a smile, her appearance stunningly beautiful as she pressed him down onto the bed. Shu Changfeng's eyes were filled with astonishment. "Anlan, why are you here?" When the scout came to report, Jiang Danju was cracking melon seeds and chatting with me. She raised an eyebrow at me and said, "Song Anlan only gave him a weak aphrodisiac, but I prepared something special for them." The tea spilled on Shu Changfeng's clothes was no ordinary potent drug. After a long while, Jiang Danju wiped her hands. "Let's go, we still need to add some ingredients." We walked together to that room, which was already in complete disarray. The man and woman who had been intimate were now unconscious, utterly exhausted. They've been drained of all strength by the drug. Jiang Danju watched coldly as two attendants behind her silently carried a pale, middle-aged man and threw him onto the bed. The three of them were a bit crowded, so the attendants tossed Shu Changfeng onto the floor and took the opportunity to dispose of the suspicious tea on his previous set of clothes. And now, this middle-aged man, completely unclothed, was the drunken Duke of Rome. After completing all this, Jiang Danju and I moved away from the room together. Tomorrow, my mother will enter the palace to see the emperor and request a decree for divorce, and today, those three will be utterly disgraced. With such a scandal, they will never have a chance to recover. She sighed with a hint of melancholy. "I might take my mother away from the capital for a while after this, but it's all right." She smiled again. "I will definitely wait until after your wedding before I leave. Let's go. We'll let the other guests discover them now. There's no need for us to get involved." Everyone was having fun. And it wasn't until the banquet was about to begin that they realized a few people were missing. Where is Brother Shu? Didn't he go to change his clothes? And where is the Duke of Rome? He disappeared in the blink of an eye. Hurry and find him, the banquet is about to start. But after searching for a long time, no one could find either of them, so they had to report it to the host, the Marquis of Yong'an. The Marquis of Yong'an and his wife were naturally extremely anxious and immediately sent people to search the entire Marquis's residence from top to bottom. The commotion was so great that it nearly alarmed all the guests in the residence. In the end, they found the stark-naked Duke of Rongwa in a remote room, and a woman holding him, fast asleep. Heavens! The Lady of Yong'an was so frightened by the disgraceful scene that she fainted. The women covered their eyes with handkerchiefs. Screaming and stepping back in panic, everyone was in a fluster, their faces filled with disgust. How disgraceful! How could they do such a thing? They have no shame. Acquaintances tried to wake up the Duke of Rome, but he kept his eyes closed, unwilling to wake. Frowning impatiently and shooing away those who disturbed him, the Marquis of Yongan, with a dark expression, called for a few elderly matrons, who doused the entangled pair with a basin of water. The icy water jolted the two awake. Song Anlan came to her senses and looked around in confusion at the standing crowd, then turned to the person beside her and let out a piercing scream. You, how could it be you? Ah! She hurriedly pulled the quilt over herself, trying to hide from the gazes of the onlookers, but the sight of the Duke of Rungwa's pale, exposed body left her too agitated to calm down. Get down, get out. The Duke of Rung had just regained consciousness when the quilt covering his body was snatched away. The varied expressions on everyone's faces left him momentarily dazed. A shrill scream pierced his ears again. In a panic and rage, he slapped the woman beside him and yanked the quilt back. Where did this lowly woman come from? How dare she do such a thing to this Duke? The Duke of Rung felt certain he had fallen into a vicious scheme devised by a woman seeking to climb the social ladder by attaching herself to nobility. He intended to push her forward to divert attention. But his plan faltered the moment he saw her face clearly. How could it be Song Anlan? His vision went dark, and he fainted once more. Song Anlan, her lip bleeding from the blows, covered her face and huddled in the corner of the bed, weeping and crying out. Someone disdainfully tossed an outer robe in her direction. Ah, what a mess this is. Doctor, oh, call the doctor. Everyone was in chaos, but someone was still anxiously shouting, where is Brother Shu, where is Shu Changfeng? Jiang Danju, to avoid witnessing the disgraceful scene involving Duke Rong, had claimed to be unwell and returned to the Duke's residence even before the banquet began. Although I stayed at the banquet with the other friends, I lingered at the back of the crowd, keeping my distance from the commotion, but when they heard that Shu Changfeng had not been found in the same room as those two, they couldn't help but be startled. Finally, people found Shu Changfeng in the adjacent room, half-conscious and disheveled, with his clothes in disarray and his hair tousled. At the sight, everyone gasped in shock and exchanged uneasy glances, while a few of his comrades quickly dispersed the crowd and stepped forward to help Shu Changfeng up. Brother Shu, how did you manage to get yourself into such a state just by changing clothes? Ah, look at his arm. It's covered in bite marks he made himself. Alas, what on earth happened? Alas, when did that woman next door enter the Marquis's residence? Shu Changfeng was in a daze and didn't respond. It wasn't until I stepped into the room that he seemed startled and quickly covered his face. Tang, he shrank back, hiding behind his comrades as if deeply ashamed to face me in such a state. Yet I merely glanced over briefly, and after understanding the situation, I walked straight away. Later, Song Anlan was arrested and taken to the authorities. The people of Yongan Marquis Manor discovered that she had sneaked into the manor and found that she was carrying a lust-inducing powder that could weaken the body. Everyone said that this woman had attempted to climb up to the Duke of Rungwa, which was why she had sneaked into the Marquis Manor and carefully plotted, and they couldn't help but sigh over the Duke of Rungwa's late-life misstep. But then, the Duchess entered the palace to see the Emperor, presenting evidence of the Duke of Rung's wrongdoings over the years, as well as proof that he had kept a mistress. She requested an imperial decree for divorce. Only then did everyone realize that the woman who had climbed into the Duke of Rung's bed was actually the daughter of his childhood sweetheart. The capital city boiled like a pot of oil, with endless discussions in tea houses and taverns. The entire city was astounded and eagerly tried to piece together the truth of this scandal. Some believed that the Duke of Rung had no sense of shame, not even sparing the daughter of an old friend. Someone recalled that day when young Master Shu was found unconscious in the neighboring room, speculating that the woman had originally intended to target him but ended up mistaking her victim. Rumors spread like wildfire, making the Shu family and the Duke of Rung so embarrassed that they dared not show their faces in public. The court had no choice but to issue a ban on discussing the matter, stripping the Duke of Rung of his title and official position, and ordering Shu Changfeng to recuperate at home instead of attending court. Amid the swirling gossip, Jiang Danju once again invited me for tea. Guess what? When Song Enlan's mother went to visit her daughter in the imperial prison, not only did she not think of helping her escape, But she even slapped her. The prison guards couldn't stop her. Song Enlan won't be able to walk out of the imperial prison alive. My despicable biological father, out of anger, has no intention of letting her go. However, that old man won't have a peaceful life from now on either. The only one who got off easy is Shu Changfeng. Who would have thought that even after being drugged, he could barely stay conscious and forced himself to crawl into another room? I nodded, but I also knew that the Shu family could no longer cause any trouble. Shu Miua married a scholar, and Shu Changfeng's father had been demoted to a minor official due to the earlier impeachment for embezzlement, and Shu Changfeng, with such a scandal, had his political career completely ruined, and would never have a peaceful day again, if that were the case. It could be considered that the great revenge had been fully avenged. My grand wedding with Shen Changyi proceeded as scheduled, with the phoenix crown and rosy veil, a dowry stretching for 10 miles, and the harmonious union of the phoenix pair. The capital had not seen such a grand feast in 10 years. The common people all came to join in the excitement and offer their congratulations along the way. This time, on the wedding night, no woman from the martial world barged in to put on my wedding dress. Only Shen Changyi carefully lifted the bridal veil, and we looked at each other with a smile. The next morning, I was so tired that I didn't want to get up, but knowing there were still things to do, I reluctantly woke up, only to meet Shen Changyi's reddened eyes. "What's wrong?" I asked hoarsely, and Shen Changyi tenderly touched my cheek, speaking slowly. "Tanga, I had a dream. In it, you married Shu Changfeng. And I left the capital in anger, but when I returned, perhaps the events in the dream were too painful for him." As Shen Changyi didn't want to continue, only holding me tightly, I was somewhat surprised. Shen Changyi had actually dreamed of a past life. A warm, damp sensation spread across my shoulder. He was actually crying. His tears slid over my shoulder, scalding hot and stirring a faint tickle. I cupped Shen Changyi's face, smiled, and kissed the corner of his lips. "Shen Changyi, when we have time, let's go see the locust tree in the yard again." Side story, Meng Huijin's perspective. On the day of Tanga's wedding, Shu Changfeng came to see me. He was no longer the ambitious, promising young man I remembered, and I did not give him a friendly look. He insisted on handing me a letter, saying that he would never bother Tanga again. I was in a hurry to attend the wedding banquet and didn't want to cause trouble on such a good day, so I reluctantly took it, planning to find a place to tear it up and throw it away, but I was too happy that day, and after drinking too much, I forgot about it. The next day, I heard the news that Shu Changfeng had drowned himself in the lake, and in a daze, I took out that letter to read. The letter was for Tanga. The words written above left me somewhat confused, yet I faintly understood. Shu Changfeng said he remembered everything. In his previous life, he had been momentarily blinded and wronged me. But he never truly wanted to lose her. He also said that during the fire, he had rushed in to save Tanja but couldn't find her. He said he understood that he and Tanja were never meant to be together. For the sins of his past life, he is willing to make amends in this one. I burned the letter after reading it. If only I had known it would come to this. Why did I act that way in the first place? It was Shu Changfeng's fault all along, like steaming a fragrant pear until it's ruined. Mistaking a fisheye for a pearl, and ultimately making an irreparable mistake. Since everything is over now, there's no need to show this letter to Tanga anymore. Completed.